Hi, I'm Christopher Leger, graduate student, Houston Baptist University, class Human Growth and Development. Today I want to talk about the COVID-19 pandemic, and the specific issue that I want to focus on is social distancing. What is social distancing? Well, in a nutshell, social distancing means, from my point of view, it means how we limit our personal interactions with one another and how we are able to communicate with one another where we don't have to be right next to one another. Before the COVID-19 pandemic, we were already moving towards a society that relied more and more upon social distancing. But we didn't call it social distancing back then. We just called it moving forward or progress. We already had classes. You could take classes online, do remote learning. You could take college courses online, and you could do other things online as far as technical training and everything. So that's one aspect. Then another aspect when it came down to social distancing that we were doing before the pandemic or began to do, we did things like such as online dating. We were heavily into social media with the advent of FaceTime, or where you can video conference someone or video teleconference someone. Even the video teleconferencing thing that happened at work. Companies have long discovered the joys or the ease of doing teleconferencing, where you don't have to have a whole bunch of people come into one area or one group or fly from one city to the next to meet in a central city. They could do video teleconferencing. So all of these things were in place before the COVID-19 pandemic. But one thing the COVID-19 pandemic was, it accelerated social distancing. It accelerated, or it fundamentally helped us to change a lot faster the way we interact with one another. So there's literature that is being written as of this day on the COVID-19 pandemic. But one thing we have to realize is that we are still early into it. We're still developing the after effects, or we're still looking at what are some of the after effects of things that moving forward, how are the implications of the COVID-19 pandemic, because we are still in the pandemic, even though we are coming out of it. As of right now, this is June 2021. The pandemic is slowly but surely starting to end, and there's literature that is being written on this pandemic right now. Some of the literature that we can look at is what are some of the social effects that the pandemic has had on teenagers and adolescent development and growth. Well, I mean, this year alone, starting back in think that was March of 2020 when schools were let out. So what happens when you let schools out, kids that's in their high school years or junior high years or even in elementary? Well, kids haven't been back in class or been around their peers in over a year and a half. So yes, that did have some effect upon their development, because part of adolescent development and part of child development is that social interaction that you get with being in a class or being in a structured environment. School is not just about the academic part of learning. It's also your socialization. How do you deal with different groups of people? How do you deal with different situations? How do you handle problems or issues that come about? How do you schedule things? One thing about school, what doesn't matter what level it is, it could be elementary, junior high, or high school. The social learning is also a major aspect of being in school day to day in a classroom environment. And those things have actually taken a hit. The latest statistics have shown that now we have our kids maybe 2 years behind in their development. You have some high schoolers right now that are graduating, but they may only be graduating at a 10th grade level, when you think about it, because they've been out of school for so long. And one thing about with the social learning aspect of it, see, the question is, we were doing a lot. We are social consumers, meaning we consume social media or social apparatuses. Like we may use websites such as Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, or even the latest TikTok. But kids nowadays, or adolescents in particular, they're social consumers. Now, to become a social learner is a totally different type of environment. And that's one of the reasons why our kids may have suffered. We may have thought that it may have been as easy as just switching over to just going to online classes. But part of your learning, or half of your learning in school, your socialization, comes from being face to face. So yes, our kids have begun to feel the ill effects of that, and it may take 2 years for us to get back to normal. The same thing that happens as far as the social distancing at work. We have adults now, some people were able to work remotely from home, but because of the COVID-19 pandemic, that has taken that to a whole new level. Now you have a vast majority of people that are working from home. Now, also one of the things about that is because now that society, we have gotten used to being back at home, it's getting harder and harder for employers to call people to come back into work. But one CEO recently said something I found a little bit interesting, and she said that basically, if you don't want to go back into the work environment, then that is going to hamper your career progression. And I do believe that to a certain extent, because part of your career, just the same as when kids going back to school, is that social atmosphere, the socialization of meeting someone face to face, talking to them, being able to see their facial expressions, being able to read their facial expression. It also helps you to develop an emotional IQ. And that's one of the things that we have that has taken a hit as far as with social distancing, especially during this COVID-19 pandemic, is our emotional IQ. So those are some of the things that we're definitely going to have to get back on track. How does this, one of the things about this is, how does this relate to the Christian worldview? Well, now, one thing about it is the Christian worldview and spirituality and worship has also taken a hit from this, because the biggest part about church or any synagogue or any temple that you go to or any mosque you go to, one of the things about it is not just the spirituality aspect of it, but it's also the fellowship. Church membership or religious membership amongst young has been on the decline these past few years, and now it has really went on the decline because of this last year and a half of this pandemic. So the spiritual worldview, the Christian worldview, is we want to get back to fellowship. We want to get back to Sunday service, Saturday service, or whatever your service that you have, because we are social creatures. And a lot of our socialization and a part of who we are is made up through how we worship. So from a Christian worldview, these things have been a test for us to see what is the true nature of human beings, what is the true nature of man, how relevant is God and spirituality in our lives. And as we can see, some people have actually, those who don't believe in the scientific data or believe in the scientific worldview, as far as vaccines, as far as viruses, look to the biblical or look to the religious point of view. We look through spirituality to answer our questions as far as, should I take this vaccine? Should I not take this vaccine? Is this going to be a test? Is this a test from God? We've been through other pandemics. We've been through other biblical plagues and everything before. So the Christian worldview is we are being tested. We are being tested by God. What is your faith? Where do you find comfort in it? Where do you find comfort? If you find comfort in your faith, then you're going to continue to find comfort in your faith. But if you were already not a spiritual person, then you're not going to suddenly just reach out and be spiritual. So Christian worldview is that one that if you're close to God and spiritual, this will bring you closer. If you hadn't been, then nothing is really gonna change for you. So in essence, what we have to understand is that this COVID-19 pandemic and the social distancing aspect is here to stay. Because one thing about it, once people get used to something, or we get used to the way things are, we pretty much keep it that way. It usually takes something catastrophic to change the way society works. And because we were already headed down the path of social distancing and being less and less one-on-one, face-to-face, well, the COVID-19 pandemic has just exacerbated or pushed us further to where we are already going to go. So think about that. Social distancing is here to stay. And psychologically, human beings, we're going to have to find new ways to relate to one another. And maybe we're going to use more and more of technology. So thank you all. I'm Christopher Leger, graduate student, Houston Baptist University, class Human Growth and Development. Thank you.